The text arrived as I was wrapping up the day at my art gallery, tucked away in a charming corner of Seattle. I'm leaving you and moving to LA with my 22-year-old boyfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. LOL. My hands didn't tremble as I read it. My smile didn't falter as I guided Mr. Jenkins through his purchase of a custom-framed print. The only sign that my partner of 14 years had just detonated our relationship via text was a fleeting tightness in my jaw. As Mr. Jenkins walked out, his artwork carefully wrapped in navy paper with a golden ribbon, I leaned on the counter and reread the message. "Good luck, Liam," I typed back with surprising calm. My name is Vanessa, and at 42, I had just received the most callous goodbye imaginable. But while Liam was probably basking in his theatrics, imagining me shattered and begging for answers, I was locking up the gallery for the evening. The signs had been there for months: late nights at work, suddenly paying more attention to his appearance, unexplained gym visits, and the flurry of new clothes. 3 months ago, I found a receipt for dinner for two at an upscale restaurant on a night Liam swore he had been working late. That same evening, I quietly opened a new bank account and moved the bulk of my savings there. The joint account he had just emptied? It held enough to avoid suspicion, but the rest was secure. I'd also been documenting every questionable charge on our credit card for nearly a year. My phone buzzed again. "Don't try to guilt me. Ezra and I are starting fresh tomorrow. I'll send for my things later." Ezra, the new assistant at the marketing firm where Liam worked. I'd met him at their office holiday party last December. He'd giggled a little too much at Liam's jokes, touched his arm when no one was watching. Young, wide-eyed, and oblivious to the warning signs of a man like Liam. I didn't reply to his text. Instead, I called my lawyer, the one I'd consulted 2 months ago after finding a string of hotel charges on our credit card. "It's time," I said. "He finally made his move?" she asked. "Exactly," I replied. "File everything tomorrow." Another buzz from Liam. "I know this must be hard for you. At least you still have your little gallery. It'll keep you occupied." My gallery. The business I had painstakingly built from scratch over the past 8 years. It generated more revenue than Liam's mid-level marketing job ever had, yet he'd always dismissed it as a hobby. Thankfully, I had kept it entirely separate from our shared finances. I smiled, thinking about the legal documents that would greet him in LA. Let him bask in his perceived victory for now. That night, I sat in my living room, my house, which I had inherited from my aunt years ago and had kept solely in my name despite Liam's repeated suggestions to add him to the deed. I poured a glass of wine and began organizing the evidence my lawyer would need: screenshots of Liam's texts, bank statements, credit card records. My phone buzzed again. "Ezra and I are going to be so happy. He understands me in ways you never could. Maybe you'll find someone closer to your own age." I took another sip of wine, then forwarded the messages to my lawyer. His own words would become his undoing. The next morning, I called the credit card company. "Mrs. Carter speaking," I said. "I need to report fraudulent charges." "Certainly, ma'am. Could you identify the charges?" "Yes. First-class tickets to Los Angeles and a luxury suite reservation," I explained, feeling a flicker of satisfaction. "Please cancel them and remove my partner as an authorized user." As the representative processed my request, I could hear the thinly veiled satisfaction in her voice. By that afternoon, Liam and Ezra would find themselves stranded at the airport, their plans unraveling before they even began. That evening, Liam's mother called. "Vanessa, dear, Liam just told us everything," she began, her tone accusatory. "He said you're being vindictive, ruining his travel plans. Did he also tell you he emptied our joint account and used our shared credit card to fund a trip with his boyfriend?" I asked coolly. A heavy pause followed. "Well," she stammered, "he said you left him no choice." "Barbara," I interrupted, "I have the texts. Would you like me to read them to you?" Silence. Then, softly, "I think it's best we end this conversation now." By the next morning, word had spread through Liam's family. His sister, Sarah, reached out to apologize. "We didn't know," she admitted. "He made it sound like you'd driven him away." I appreciated her words, but they didn't change much. I was done explaining myself. 2 weeks later, During an emergency hearing, Liam arrived in his new designer wardrobe, trying to exude confidence. It crumbled the moment my lawyer presented our meticulously prepared evidence, texts boasting about emptying the account, credit card charges for his getaway, and records showing my gallery's finances had always been kept separate. The judge ruled decisively, freezing all shared assets and ordering Liam to repay the emptied funds. "Mr. Carter," the judge said sharply, "financial misconduct and fraudulent charges carry significant consequences. Consider yourself warned." Liam left the courtroom visibly deflated, his dreams of a carefree life with Ezra quickly unraveling. 6 months later, my gallery expanded to a second location. Meanwhile, Liam's life had fallen apart. Ezra had left him, unimpressed by the reality of sharing a cramped apartment with a middle-aged man whose credit was in shambles. Looking back, I felt no anger, only pride. Pride in my foresight, my strength, and my ability to rebuild. Above my desk in the gallery, I framed Liam's final text to me. "At least your little gallery will keep you busy." Below it hung the award for Best Independent Business in Seattle. Success, after all, is the best revenge. The charges were clear: 2 first-class tickets to Los Angeles, booked earlier that day, and a luxurious suite reservation at the Beverly Grand Hotel. My voice didn't waver as I spoke to the credit card representative. "I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel this card," I said calmly. "Of course, Ms. Taylor. Do you have documentation of the fraud?" "Yes." Text messages from my husband admitting to using our joint card to book this travel with his boyfriend after clearing out our bank account. "I'll forward them right away." The representative couldn't entirely hide her satisfaction as she confirmed the cancellations. Liam and Ezra, my soon-to-be ex-husband and his new assistant, would wake up tomorrow to a nightmare, invalidated tickets, and a canceled hotel stay. My phone buzzed again. "Don't worry about the house," Liam wrote. "I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller." I laughed out loud at the audacity. Did he genuinely think he had any claim to the home I inherited from my grandmother? Did he really forget whose name was on the deed? Another message. "And about the gallery, you can keep it, but we'll need to work out a fair buyout for my half." His half. My gallery. The one I had built entirely on my own, funded with years of savings, and nurtured while he dismissed it as a hobby. I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. This moment qualified. Tomorrow, Liam would face some hard truths about property laws and separate assets. Tonight, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction and began planning my next steps. By morning, my phone was lighting up with furious texts from Liam. "What did you do to the credit card?" "The airline won't honor our tickets." "The hotel canceled the reservation." "Answer me." I silenced my phone and headed to the gallery. Fridays were always busy, and I had a shipment of new sculptures to unpack. Life goes on, even when your husband abandons you for someone half his age. Around noon, my phone buzzed again, but this time it was Liam's mother, Gloria. "Vanessa, dear, Liam just told us everything," she began, her tone carrying a hint of judgment. "He says you've been so controlling and cold that you drove him away. And now you're sabotaging his travel plans." I placed the call on speaker while arranging a new window display. "Did he also mention emptying our joint account and using the credit card to fund a trip for him and his boyfriend?" I asked. There was a long silence. Then Gloria stammered, "Well, he said you left him no choice. That you were distant." "Gloria, I have the texts. Would you like me to read the one where he brags about taking our money? Or the one where he mocks my age?" She hesitated before muttering, "He did seem a bit cruel." I told him that text was inappropriate. "I appreciate your call, but I think it's best we end this conversation. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Liam's family during the proceedings." "Proceedings?" she asked, her voice rising. "Already underway," I replied, ending the call. By the afternoon, gossip had spread. Liam's sister, Amelia, texted me in disbelief. "Liam and Ezra are stuck at some budget motel near the airport," she wrote. "Their big escape is off to a rough start." Apparently, Liam had tried using his personal credit cards, only to discover they were maxed out, a detail I'd noted months ago. Later that evening, my lawyer called with an update. The emergency hearing is set for Monday, she said. Given his texted admissions of clearing the account and committing credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze all remaining assets. Has he been served yet? Not yet, I replied. But he'll get the papers soon, at his new motel address. She chuckled. Speaking of which, Ezra's social media posts are providing excellent evidence. He's been sharing their adventures all day, including some choice remarks about you. I smiled, thinking of my growing evidence folder, a year's worth of suspicious charges, hotel receipts, and incriminating texts. Liam had been so focused on his grand escape that he never considered I might be watching, waiting, and preparing. Monday's hearing was exactly as I'd hoped. Liam arrived in his new, youthful wardrobe, a tight blazer and jeans that screamed midlife crisis. Ezra was absent, perhaps realizing the shine of his new relationship was already tarnished. My lawyer presented our case methodically, Liam's gleeful admissions about the emptied account, fraudulent charges, and hidden expenses. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture. Mr. Taylor, the judge said sternly, you've admitted to financial misconduct and unauthorized credit card use. Do you deny this? I was just trying to make a clean break, Liam stammered. The judge raised an eyebrow. By committing fraud? When Liam's lawyer attempted to claim a stake in my gallery, my lawyer cut him off. Vanessa's gallery was established before the marriage, and she maintained strict separation of finances. We have records of every penny invested. Liam's expression turned pale as reality sank in. His grand plan to take half my business was crumbling. The judge ruled to freeze our joint assets and ordered Liam to repay the funds he'd taken. As we left the courtroom, I could hear him arguing with Ezra outside about their plans being ruined. 6 months later, my gallery expanded to a second location, while Liam struggled to rebuild his life. Ezra had left him, and he was living in a studio apartment, grappling with debt and regret. Above my desk, I hung a framed version of Liam's text, "At least your little gallery will keep you busy." Below it, I displayed my latest award for Best Independent Business of the Year. Because, as they say, the best revenge is thriving without them. Liam showed up at the courthouse wearing jeans far too tight for his age and a blazer that screamed midlife crisis. His younger boyfriend, Ezra, waited outside, his youth painfully obvious under the harsh courthouse lighting. Inside, my lawyer methodically presented the evidence we had painstakingly gathered over months, Liam's texts bragging about emptying our joint account, proof of credit card fraud, and documentation of his hidden expenses. Each piece painted a damning picture of Liam's recklessness and deceit. Your Honor, Liam's hastily hired lawyer began. My client admits to some rash decisions, but Vanessa's actions have been vindictive and calculating. Calculating? My lawyer countered. You mean prudent? My client protected her separate assets and kept detailed records of her husband's suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive, it's smart business. The judge reviewed the documents. The deed to my house, clearly listed in my name alone, the incorporation papers for my gallery, established well before my marriage to Liam, and the financial records showing the meticulous separation of business and personal finances that Liam had always dismissed as obsessive. Mr. Taylor, the judge addressed Liam directly, you admitted via text message to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a trip with your boyfriend. Do you deny this? Liam shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I was just trying to make a clean break, he muttered. By committing financial fraud, the judge asked, raising an eyebrow. And now you're claiming rights to property that documentation shows is clearly separate from marital assets? My client is entitled to a share of the business, Liam's lawyer argued weakly. It grew during their marriage. The gallery was established before the marriage, my lawyer interjected, and Ms. Taylor maintained strict separation of finances throughout. We have records of every penny invested and earned. I watched as Liam's bravado melted away. He had thought this would be easy, empty our accounts, run off with Ezra, and maybe claim half my gallery in the divorce. He had never respected my insistence on keeping everything separate, often mocking my careful bookkeeping as obsessive. Now, that very diligence was his undoing. The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, the judge announced. All shared assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Taylor is ordered to return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone, Liam protested. We spent it on. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it, the judge cut him off sharply. And, Mr. Taylor, the court takes a very dim view of using shared credit cards to fund personal adventures. Outside the courthouse, I heard Ezra questioning Liam about their plans for LA. Liam's response was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently across the marble floor as I headed back to my gallery, the business he had never understood or respected. Over the following weeks, Liam's desperation grew. He tried claiming the gallery had been his idea, that he'd invested money in its early days, even that he had been my business partner all along. Each claim crumbled under the weight of my meticulous records. He's getting desperate, my lawyer remarked during one of our meetings. And judging by Ezra's latest social media posts, things aren't going well. It turned out Ezra's receptionist salary wasn't enough to fund the glamorous escape Liam had promised. They were now sharing a cramped studio apartment, far removed from the luxury Liam had envisioned. Even Liam's family started reaching out. His sister, Amelia, called to apologize. We had no idea, she admitted. Liam made it sound like you were cold and controlling, that he needed to escape. But then we saw his texts, the way he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew. His mother, Gloria, called again, this time in tears. The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger, I thought I raised him better, she said. I let their messages go to voicemail. Their support might have meant something weeks ago, but now it felt like rats deserting a sinking ship. Meanwhile, my gallery thrived, ironically boosted by the local gossip about my situation. Women came in specifically to show their support, often leaving with far more than they'd planned to buy. I went through something similar with my ex. One customer confided while purchasing a handcrafted sculpture. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. I smiled, thinking of the framed quote I'd recently hung above my desk, "The best revenge is thriving without them." Months later, Liam was still scrambling to rebuild his life. Ezra had left him, unimpressed by the reality of sharing a tiny apartment with a middle-aged man burdened by debt and legal troubles. Liam's attempts to find work were hindered by his ruined reputation, and he had burned too many bridges to rely on family support. As for me, I had opened a second gallery location and was in talks to launch an online store. Above my desk, next to Liam's final mocking text, "At least your little gallery will keep you busy," I displayed my latest award, Best Independent Business of the Year. Looking back, I felt no bitterness, only pride. Liam had underestimated me, but in doing so, he had only pushed me to rise higher. Because the best revenge isn't anger, it's success. Liam's texts came sporadically, swinging between anger and attempts at manipulation. "You've ruined everything," one message read. "I never meant to hurt you. Can't we work something out?" That gallery wouldn't even exist without my support. Each one, I forwarded to my lawyer without a word. If Liam wanted to dig his own grave, I was happy to hand him a shovel. Through the grapevine, I heard Ezra was having second thoughts. Sharing a cramped studio apartment with a middle-aged man who couldn't pay his share of the rent wasn't quite the romantic adventure he had imagined. The age gap that had seemed thrilling during their secret meetings in fancy hotels looked different under the glare of harsh reality. Ezra's social media posts shifted from bragging about their new life to cryptic comments about toxic relationships and learning from mistakes. When my lawyer mentioned that Ezra had removed his relationship status online, I almost felt sorry for Liam. Almost. Then I remembered how gleeful he'd been about emptying our account and his casual cruelty when he mocked my age. Instead of pity, I felt something else, pride. Pride in my foresight, my quiet strength, and my ability to protect myself while Liam underestimated me at every turn. The final divorce hearing bore little resemblance to the triumph Liam had likely envisioned. Gone was the cocky bravado, in its place was barely concealed panic. Ezra was conspicuously absent, rumored to have moved on to a co-worker his own age. Liam, now dressed in his old clothes, looked every bit the picture of someone scrambling to regain control. The designer wardrobe he'd flaunted with Ezra had been returned, likely to offset the repayment ordered by the court. My client contributed significantly to his wife's business through moral support, Liam's lawyer argued weakly. Moral support? My lawyer shot back. What my client built was the result of her vision, determination, and business acumen. Mr. Taylor's role was limited to undermining her efforts while benefiting from her success. The judge didn't even let Liam's lawyer finish before declaring the verdict. The court upheld my separate ownership of the gallery and the home I had inherited. Joint assets were frozen, and Liam was ordered to repay every cent he had taken from our accounts. Outside the courthouse, Liam confronted me, his face red with frustration. "You planned this all along," he accused. "You knew this would happen." I met his gaze without flinching. "No, Liam. I just paid attention. And unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records." Gloria, Liam's mother, stepped between us, her voice sharp. "That's enough, Liam." She escorted him to her car, where he'd be returning to his childhood bedroom, a fitting irony for the man who mocked me for my age and life choices. 6 months later, I stood in my newly expanded gallery, reflecting on how far I'd come. Liam was still struggling to rebuild his life, but the gallery he had dismissed as a hobby was thriving. I'd hired 3 new employees and launched an online store that had quickly gained national traction. The news of Liam's struggles trickled back to me through mutual acquaintances. He had tried applying for a senior position in a nearby firm, but was passed over for someone with a cleaner record. When he attempted to claim age discrimination, HR reportedly added the complaint to his already thick file of grievances. One afternoon, Gloria stopped by the gallery. Her demeanor was far more subdued than it had been months ago. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly, clutching her handbag tightly. "I believed everything Liam told me, that you were cold and controlling. But then I saw the texts, the way he bragged about taking your money. I'm sorry." I nodded but kept my response neutral. Gloria's remorse might have mattered months ago, but now it felt like too little, too late. The gallery's success brought unexpected opportunities. Local business magazines reached out to feature my story, not as the scorned wife of a failed marriage, but as a savvy entrepreneur who had protected her interests and built something remarkable. Young business owners sought my advice about separating personal and professional finances. "The best protection is preparation," I told a young woman who reminded me of Ezra in her naive enthusiasm. "And always trust your instincts." Gloria called occasionally, mostly after Liam had done something foolish or embarrassing, but I kept my distance. Their family drama was no longer my concern. My life had moved forward, and my energy was now focused on plans for a 3rd gallery location and the launch of a luxury accessories line. Above my desk hung a framed print of Liam's last mocking text, "At least your little gallery will keep you busy." Beneath it, I proudly displayed my latest award, Innovator of the Year in Art and Business. Success, after all, is the best revenge. In my office, a framed screenshot of Liam's final text hung prominently, "Have fun with your little gallery. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." Beneath it sat my most recent award, Innovator of the Year in Arts and Business, a testament to how far I had come. What Liam intended as a cruel jab had become a constant reminder of my triumph over his underestimation. As I arranged a display of hand-carved sculptures, the doorbell jingled. Gloria, Liam's mother, walked in clutching her purse like a shield. She approached cautiously, her usually haughty demeanor replaced by unease. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I believed everything Liam told me, that you were cold, controlling, and didn't support his dreams. But then I watched him try the same manipulation tactics on me when things got tough." I kept arranging the display. "Those weren't dreams, Gloria. They were escapes." She paused before nodding. "I know that now. He tried to move in with me after you froze the accounts. But I couldn't keep enabling him. Now he's back in his old room, and Ezra's gone." When she left, my assistant manager, Layla, approached. "Was that the ex-boyfriend's mother?" she whispered. "No," I replied, smiling faintly. Just another person who learned the same lesson I did. By now, my gallery was much more than a business. It was a symbol of resilience, independence, and the power of women refusing to be underestimated. As I reviewed the plans for a fourth location, I reflected on how Liam's attempt to diminish me had backfired. Instead of breaking me, he had inadvertently pushed me to grow stronger, more determined, and more successful. My phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. Vanessa, Liam filed another petition to revisit the settlement. The judge dismissed it immediately and ordered him to pay court costs. I thought you'd enjoy that. I couldn't help but smile. It was yet another example of how preparation and prudence had protected me. Liam had once mocked my insistence on keeping personal and professional finances separate. Now, it was the very thing that shielded me from his misguided attempts to claim what wasn't his. When young women asked for advice about business and relationships, I always said, trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia. Over the years, the gallery had grown from a small space into a thriving chain of 5 locations. What Liam once dismissed as a little hobby now employed 30 people and had been featured in national magazines. One of my most loyal customers, a successful entrepreneur, once told me, "Your story inspires me. It shows that women can build something lasting when they stop falling for empty promises." At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original gallery, I stood in front of my employees and loyal customers. The space had transformed from a modest beginning into the flagship store of a thriving brand. Looking around the room, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Liam had expected me to beg, to crumble, to prove him right about my desperation. Instead, I built something stronger than ever before. Each new gallery location was a testament to what women could achieve when they refused to dim their light for insecure men. A month after the anniversary, I hired a new assistant, a bright young woman named Mia. One afternoon, she approached me with questions about the inventory system. As I explained the process, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a nearby glass case. I no longer saw the woman who had been blindsided by betrayal. Instead, I saw someone who had rebuilt herself, someone who had turned adversity into triumph. As Vanessa looked over the plans for her next gallery, she felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't thought possible years ago. Success wasn't just about wealth or recognition, it was about the life she had created on her own terms. The framed screenshot in her office wasn't just a reminder of her past, it was a celebration of her strength and determination. Because the best revenge isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. Advice from my story. The first lesson I learned is the importance of protecting your independence. This goes beyond financial security. It's about maintaining autonomy in your work, your emotions, and your life. I decided to keep my personal and business finances separate, and that choice shielded me when Liam tried to claim what wasn't his. Independence isn't just a preference, it's a foundation that allows you to grow and thrive without relying on others. For me, it meant being prepared for the unexpected, building an emergency fund, keeping detailed records, and understanding the value of standing on my own. Protecting your independence not only helps you overcome challenges, but also gives you the confidence to make decisions, knowing you've built a stable base for yourself. Another key takeaway is to trust your instincts. I noticed subtle but undeniable signs from Liam long before he left: suspicious spending habits, dismissive comments, and a growing distance. These were red flags that I couldn't ignore. Trusting my instincts allowed me to act in time, consulting a lawyer and securing my finances before things got worse. In life, there are moments when something feels off, even if you can't quite pinpoint why. Don't disregard those feelings. They're often your inner voice guiding you toward the right course of action. Listening to myself and acting on those instincts didn't just protect me, it empowered me to take control of my own story. Finally, I learned the power of turning adversity into growth. Liam's betrayal could have destroyed me, but instead, I channeled that pain into building something stronger: my business, my confidence, and my independence. Challenges can hurt, but they're also opportunities for reinvention. By focusing on what you can create rather than what you've lost, you build resilience and adaptability. For me, the best revenge wasn't about proving Liam wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could thrive on my own terms.